Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to another live episode of the Chronicles of a Goon Arsenal podcast, part of course, the 90 Min Football family. And on today's episode, I wanted to kind of continue to react to what we saw last night in Eindhoven. I think Mikel Arteta's come in for some really unfair criticism with regards to his treatment of those three young players that, of course, made the trip over to Eindhoven. We're talking about Walters, we're talking about Lino Sosa, and we're talking, of course, about Ethan Nwaneri. We'll get into that in a little bit. I also want to talk about Arsenal's left back situation. Now, on the surface of it, you might think left back, we're really well stocked there. We've got Takehiro Tomiyasu, who can play in that position. We've got Alexander Zinchenko, who was a game changer for Arsenal during the last campaign. We've got Jurrien Timber to come back from injury, and we've been using Jakub Kiwior in that position. So as wild as this might sound, I think we still have a problem there. I really do. And we'll come on to exactly why in a little bit. We'll break down the four options that we do currently have, even though two of them, of course, are currently unavailable. We'll discuss that. We'll discuss what each option brings to the table. And then I'll summarize, I guess, why I feel that Arsenal, despite having an array of options in that position, actually do have a problem at left back. And it's a problem that could cost us and could cost us quite dearly, in my opinion. Big hello to everybody joining us in the live chat box. I can see that there are plenty of you with us. Big hello to Thierry Henry, not the real one. We've got Ebube, we've got Crypto, we've got Hacker, we've got Jan Tora, we've got Adair joining us. Cesar is with us. Richie is here. We've got William Young, we've got Stan the Man, we've got Evan. We've got lots and lots of you with us. So if you could please leave a like on the video, that would really help if you're watching us on YouTube. If you're listening on any of the audio platforms, then please do subscribe there and leave us a review as well. That really does help. I'll start then with the criticism that Mikel Arteta has faced off the back of the PSV Eindhoven game, which I think is grossly unfair. I can't get my head around why some people are so angry about this. I understand why people might disagree with the way that Mikel Arteta opted to use senior players from the bench rather than using some of the youngsters. I understand why people would look at someone like Cedric Suarez and think no future at this football club. Why has he got a game ahead of one of those youngsters? I get that. I really do. But I don't think it warrants or justifies some of the anger and some of the nonsense I've seen said about Mikel Arteta since last night's game. So, first of all, on the Cedric Suarez point, I get it, right? He isn't a part of this setup moving forward. He's someone that's at the club, probably partly because we can't get rid. Maybe he's being used in a bit of a Rob Holding role, if you like, which is to help young players along on their path, to help them grow, to make up numbers in training. I don't know. We signed him up on a 4-year contract. So, it's going to be difficult to move someone like Cedric on if there's not really that much interest in him. But whatever you say about Cedric Suarez, and I know a lot of us, have looked at him in the past and said not good enough. I know a lot of us have felt that he's been culpable at certain moments over recent seasons and all the rest of it. But he is an experienced professional, an experienced former Portuguese international who's been in the Premier League for years. He's played in continental tournaments and all the rest of it. He is less of a risk in a game like that than a 17-year-old or an 18-year-old that's not even played a senior game. That is fact. Whether you want to accept that or not is another thing. And I understand that in the long term, you're probably going to gain more from playing the young kid. But first of all, Mikel Arteta had a game to go out and try and win. And yes, it was a dead rubber. But as I mentioned in the post-match podcast that we did last night, there is no way that Mikel Arteta would want us to suffer 2 back-to-back defeats ahead of a really important run of games coming up. We've got the game coming up against Brighton at the weekend, and then we go to Anfield. In 10 days' time, we go to Anfield. That is going to be one hell of a test. That is going to be one hell of a toss. You need your confidence levels to be as high as they can possibly be going into a game like that. Losing a second game, I think, would have been damaging to our psyche. And I think Robert sums this up brilliantly in the chat. He says it was important not to lose that game last night from a psychological point. Had we been 2 clear goals up, he'd have brought the kids on with 10 minutes to go. Completely agree. The game state did not allow it. And we touched on this on yesterday's podcast. The reason I'm kind of repeating myself with this and feeling the need to bring it up again is because I cannot believe how many Arsenal fans are genuinely upset about this and angry about this. You might disagree. In theory, I probably disagree as well, but it's not something to beat the manager up over, for God's sake. And this is the problem. We get into this space where we look at young players. We say, oh, he's a great prospect. He's someone that, could potentially be a big player for us going forward. How many of them actually turn out to be that? Not a lot. At clubs like Arsenal, that's the reality. At clubs like Arsenal, there will be your outliers, your Bukayo Sakas, your Eddie Nketiahs, your Emile Smith-Rowe that do eventually make their way through into the first team. But generally speaking, we are going to go out and buy first team players. That's how it works at the very, very top level. I just think, yes, it's nice to give them a go. Yes, it's nice to give them the opportunity if you can, but not at the expense of the team. People underrate, I think, although it was a dead rubber, what a decent result that was against a really, really good PSV Eindhoven side who have this immaculate record in the Dutch Eredivisie this season. To go there and not get beat, having made 8 changes, is actually a testament to the way that Arteta managed the game, but also to the performance of those that did play. I thought Cedric had a few hairy moments in the second half, but in the first half, I thought he was quite solid. And I thought, I always think it's difficult to come into a team that is all sort of mixed up and jumbled about and expect players to just slot into that and be at their brilliant best. Then there's not that familiarity. We talked about the lack of cohesion and all the rest of it. I'm not saying that, there's no case for them to have played some part in the game yesterday. But I did say on the show yesterday, and I stick by this, I think that for them to go along and be a part of the traveling group, be a part of the training in preparation for a game like that, and all the rest of it is massive in terms of their education. And not just that, but the way that you embed them in the group, their integration within the first team group is obviously helped and assisted by the fact that they were part of the traveling party for an away Champions League game, no matter how significant the game was. Fuad says, less of a risk for what though, H? There are no implications to the result. At what point do we allow and let these talented kids play? I think there are always implications, Fuad, to every result. I think if you lose a second consecutive game when you're used to winning, I think that can have a detrimental effect. I think it can have even the smallest effect, but that small effect could be a difference maker because in the Premier League, we're always talking about the finest of margins. Mikel Arteta, had Arsenal gone and won at Aston Villa, maybe would have looked at last night differently. But because we lost, I don't think he thinks from a psychological point of view that you can allow that to then continue. So I think he found the right balance last night between picking a team that was clearly taking into consideration those that need a rest most because they weren't involved, not from the start anyway, but also, one that was good enough and well equipped enough to go on and get a result from Eindhoven. And in the end, like to back up the point that Mikel Arteta obviously felt that not losing was important, he brings Declan Rice on, he brings Martin Odegaard on, he even brings on Gabriel Jesus right at the death. You don't risk those players if you don't have any interest in the result. So you or I might not have an interest in the result. And, the result may have no implication on how, the group ends and where we finish and what it means for us in the next round. Agreed. But to Mikel Arteta, there were implications to the idea and to the potential of losing. And that's why he did what he did. And I think that's his prerogative as the manager, right? And again, I'll reiterate the point before we move on from this. I'm not saying that people that think he should have played the youngsters don't have a case. I just can't believe the level of outrage and I can't believe the level of vitriol that's been thrown Mikel Arteta's way. Now, most of you guys in this chat box are not doing that, right? Because we've built up a great community of excellent people. But if you scroll through X, social media, Twitter, whatever you call it nowadays, and read some of the comments about Mikel Arteta and his decision not to include those youngsters yesterday, you will be shocked, man. Like, you will be shocked. There's some real nonsense being spouted on there. What else have we got? Benjamin Brotherson says the fact that they are traveling means they are training regularly with the first team, and that is good enough for me. Yeah, so they're training at London Colney with the first team. But that's one thing. To go away, I think, on a Champions League trip and experience all the things around it does bring you closer together, I think. And I do think that's important for their integration. Also, I mentioned it on the pod last night. I think that you want these players to get a taste of it so that they are driven and more motivated when it comes to getting that opportunity down the line. I do think that we're in a place where we give footballers too much too soon. Ethan Nwaneri's what, 16, 17? There's no reason for him to lose sleep over the fact that he was in a Champions League squad but didn't come off the bench. That's the point I'm making. A bit of patience. O'Malley says you all are tripping. Keeping the first team happy is more important than some kids, and that's another point, right? Mikel Arteta has the balance, keeping some of the fringe players in the first team. Your Reece Nelsons, for example, your Jorginhos, for example, your Leandro Trossards, your Eddie Nketiahs. He has to balance keeping those guys happy, and that is more important than keeping those kids happy at this point, because who are we going to have to turn to if our season ends up in a certain way? Who are we going to turn to? We're more likely to have to turn to Nketiah, given Jesus' injury record. We're more likely to have to turn to someone like Jorginho, to Trossard, to Jakub Kiwior. Those players need to be prioritized because they are a part of the first team. They're not players that have just been propped up into the first team squad in recent weeks because we're short of numbers. And it's really, really important. It's really, really important that Mikel Arteta manages the squad that he needs to hopefully go on and win the Premier League, hopefully challenge in the latter stage of the Champions League. And he needs to prioritize that before he prioritizes the kids, as I say. It's not like they're at an age where, they're going to start getting agitated or frustrated. They're at a point in their careers where they're very much still learning. And there's plenty of time for those guys to get their chances and, of course, come good. But anyway, we're going to move on from that. We're going to talk about the left-back situation because I think this is a really, really interesting discussion. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Welcome back along to the show. Right, let's talk about Arsenal's left-back situation. Now, I mentioned in my intro that this might sound like a bit of a strange discussion to be having, and you only need to look at the thumbnail of this episode to see that we've got an array of options in the left-back position, right? Last season, Alexander Zinchenko came in. He was brilliant. He revolutionized the way we played by going into midfield. He added to our creativity. I think at times there were questions over his defensive abilities and defensive capabilities, but he was outstanding. I think at times we've seen Takehiro Tomiyasu last season and this season utilized as a left-back, and he's been outstanding. Jurrien Timber is another one that we signed in the summer for relatively big money, who started the season as our left back and looked great. Okay, it was a small sample size, but he looked fantastic. And boom, he picks up that long-term injury and he's out. We've also seen Jakub Kiwior, a central defender that we signed from Spezia, Polish international, come in and at times be utilized as a left fullback. If you want to really push it, we've even seen Kai Havertz play at left back for the German national team. Not that I'm suggesting that's an option for us. But the point I'm trying to make is that on paper, it looks like we've got loads of options. And on paper, it looks like a position that will be absolutely fine in. The problem comes when you start picking up injuries, which has obviously happened to us throughout the course of the season so far. We've lost a number of players. We've lost Zinchenko at points this season. We've lost Tomiyasu at points this season. We've also lost Jurrien Timber for the long term as well. So all of a sudden, those options look a little bit thinner. Now, I'm not trying to be knee-jerk, right? Because I think that what I'm about to say and what I'm about to talk about has been a concern for a lot of Arsenal fans over quite a long period of time now. And my concern is about how we cope with the injuries that we have and how we approach certain games when it comes to the left back position. So home to Wolves, home to Burnley, play with Zinchenko at left back. You're going to have more of the ball than not. You're going to be in those advanced areas. You're going to get him into the midfield, and you're going to more often than not be able to handle the holes that he leaves by pushing Gabriel along, bringing William Saliba inside, using Ben White as well as a third centre-back in certain phases of play, because those guys are all great at playing in one-on-one situations, at controlling and patrolling spaces, and all the rest of it, right? You're fine most of the time, but there are going to be games where you're going to be exposed when you have a clear and obvious weakness in the left fullback position. And that is why, for me, as good as he is on the ball, and it was really, really important when we brought him on, for example, um, against Luton, because he helped us to change from a more rigid sort of option at left back and a more defensive minded option to someone a bit more creative who could drop into midfield and help us, and hopefully we find the winner, and we did in the end. Zinchenko's big like that. He scored a good goal against Wolves, or sorry, scored a goal. He scored a goal against Burnley. He created a goal against Wolves, playing really, really well and showing what he can do in an attacking sense down the left hand side. But then you go to places like Aston Villa and it's a problem. It's a problem having Zinchenko there. I think the way he pressed so aggressively in the lead up to their goal was a sign of, as great as he is, as experienced as he is, it was just a sign of how naive he can be at times, because his mind is on going forward. His mind is on winning the ball back. His mind is on aggression and sort of what we can do once we pinch the ball back, rather than, going to Villa Park and saying, right, lads, first 20 minutes, let's keep it tight. Let's keep it solid. He's a great player in his own right, but is he always the answer at left back? I don't know that he is. And that's what made it so great that we had, initially Jurrien Timber at the start of the season, a player that we thought could fill in that position in the situations where we needed to be a little bit more defensive. And then, of course, we've seen Tomiyasu do that role as well over the last couple of years. And you think, well, great, when we do come to those games, and Anfield away coming up is one of those games that I'll put into this category, where you need to be a bit safer, where you need to be a little bit more pragmatic, and you need your fullback to be a better one-on-one defender. Then you think, right, sorry, Zinny, you're great at what you do, but I need to sacrifice you on this occasion. And I think most fans accept that. And I think even he accepts that. He's spoken quite openly about the mistakes that he's made. He's spoken quite openly about the fact that even in his own mind, he's not the greatest defender. He knows that that's something he could improve on. So if Mikel Arteta was to pull him aside before a game like Liverpool away and say, Zinny, great player, fantastic player, love what you do for us, love what you bring on the ball, but I'm going to go with Tomiyasu because I want someone who's a specialist defender to try and keep tabs on Mo Salah, for example, like we saw last season, then fine. I don't think that Zinchenko would have a problem with that. And I think that's the kind of adaptability that Mikel Arteta was hoping for when he signed Jurrien Timber. And obviously he's well aware of Tomiyasu's ability to play there as well. He has tried to mirror what he's been able to do with Tomiyasu, who was a centre-back by trade when he arrived, and has been essentially converted into someone that's very competent at fullback. He has tried to do what he did with Ben White, bring in someone in who naturally was a central player, but has very, very comfortably transitioned into, a player that can play fullback to a really, really high standard. He's tried to do that with Jakub Kiwior, but it's not working. Jakub Kiwior, to me, doesn't look comfortable in that position. He doesn't look comfortable inverting into midfield, and equally he doesn't look comfortable in one-on-one situations playing as a more traditional orthodox fullback. So right now, with Timber still out, although Mikel Arteta said he was flying in his recovery, and with Tomiyasu out, and of course the Asian Cup to come as well, which could see us be without Tomiyasu right up until February, for example, we currently have a problem at left back. I mean, what would you do? Go into Anfield on the 23rd of December, what would you do? Zinchenko or Kiwior? I think the answer has to be Zinchenko. But does that fill you with confidence going to a place like Anfield? There's a reason that last season, when we played Liverpool at Emirates Stadium, Mikel Arteta went with Tomiyasu at left back. He did it because he felt that he needed someone that was a better one-on-one defender to limit Mo Salah's influence on the game. So I am concerned about this, and I don't get why we're not allowed to say this about Zinchenko. I beg your pardon. Great footballer, brilliant in possession, brilliant on the ball, offers you so much, but defensively, he is a weak link in this Arsenal side, and everyone can see it. Mikel Arteta can see it too, which is why he's tried to get creative with the left back situation. It's why he brought someone in that was a versatile defender that could potentially play at left back. Unfortunately, he's been injured. It's why he's utilized Tomiyasu in that position as well. Are we in a place where we could have done with Kieran Tierney now? Maybe, but hindsight is an easy thing to kind of go back to, and we didn't know that both Tommy and Timber were going to be injured at crucial points in the season. I want to get some of your thoughts as well in the live chat on this, but it's not that I think we have a problem generally at left back. When you think about the options that we've got, which I've just explained, and what each of them brings to the table, I think generally speaking, we're okay. But when you lose two of those options, then all of a sudden we look quite thin there. And we've lost two of the best options for a game like a trip to Anfield, or for a game like the one we played at Aston Villa. For games like that, I would rank both Tomiyasu and Timber as better options than Zinchenko. For games like Brighton at home at the weekend, different story. I want to see Zinchenko play. For games like the one against Wolves, albeit he made a couple of mistakes that day, I want to see Zinchenko play. But you got to take it with the context, and you got to look at each fixture in its own right. And we always said it. We said it last season that Zinchenko defensively is vulnerable. So it's a shame now that the only alternative option we have to him going into this game. Obviously, we've got Brighton first, and I'm not dismissing that game, but the only option that we have alternatively is the one that's the least comfortable at making that transition from centre back to full back. It feels like a major problem today. It might not be a major problem in February. So do we go out and address it in January? Probably not. I would say that the club will probably look at it and think, no, we just need to get through this period, because we have obviously those options to come back. But at this moment in time, it is an issue and it is a problem. And that's why I wanted to do a piece on it, because it is something that concerns me. And, one of the other ways of maybe addressing that, and I thought that Mikel might have done this up at Villa Park, was maybe to sort of slightly adjust the midfield balance. Now, if you play, which we've tended to do in away games quite a bit, obviously Kai Havertz's form has been so good of late that I think Mikel Arteta probably felt that he couldn't afford to ignore him going into the Villa game. But, a lot of the time this season, we've seen Rice and Jorginho play in midfield. And with Jorginho playing in that more central role, it does give Declan Rice a bit of license to get forward, but also a bit of license to be able to kind of drift out to that left-hand side and support whoever it is that's playing at left back defensively. So I just wonder if maybe that's the way to go for Mikel Arteta when we go to Anfield. I look at Jorginho, and if I come up with one criticism for him, it'll be a lack of mobility. We talked about it before. And maybe Anfield's not the best place for him necessarily, but I just wonder if Mikel Arteta will bring him in to try and adjust the balance of the side a little bit in order to help us protect that left back position a bit better. I don't know. But it's a really, really interesting discussion, and one I'm keen to get you guys' thoughts on as well. Let's take this comment from Louis, who says, I agree that we need to sort the left back position out, as Zinchenko has been looking a bit sus lately in his defending. Going forward, he's great, but sometimes he falls asleep during games, costing us. Nacho says Tierney was so amazing for these winter worries and provided a different option. I'm still exasperated at why we let him leave, especially when we knew we had lost Timber. It's a good point, but I think a lot of that would have been pushed from Kieran Tierney's side as well. He'd have been grossly unhappy with the fact that he wasn't playing, he was displaced by Zinchenko, and then of course Timber coming in, offering another option at fullback. And there were times last season where Mikel Arteta opted for Tomiyasu at fullback over Kieran Tierney, which kind of made him feel that he was too far down the pecking order already. Tailwood Studio says the criticism Zinchenko gets is odd. It's understandable, but still odd. Imagine being a fullback, but the manager picks you as a striker and you get criticized for not being a natural goal scorer. Yeah, but I don't think anyone looks at Zinchenko and says, you're a crap footballer, that's why we don't want you playing at left back. Like, there is context that needs to be applied to this, right? My view is that Zinchenko is as good a football technician as we have in the entire squad. Zinchenko, for me, is a midfield player. And when we play in games where we're comfortable and we're dominant and we're expected to have the ball, he spends most of his time playing as exactly that, a midfielder. Yeah, he drops into the back four at times when we're in a defensive phase of play, but generally speaking, he spends the majority of his time in midfield. He probably doesn't get the same amount of time in midfield if he isn't coming from left back, being that extra man, being that extra body, coming into those spaces a little bit later. But my criticism of Zinchenko is not to do with him as a footballer and his technical ability. I understand full well that he's been asked to play out of position, but that doesn't mean that I'm just going to accept him playing out of position and the problems that that causes us when we're going away to the likes of Villa and we're going away to the likes of Liverpool, because that doesn't put us in the best possible position to win games. And that's all I care about. That's all I care about. Hacker says Zinchenko is a soldier. He'll do what he's told without thinking about it too much, in my opinion. What else have we got in the chat? Zek says maybe Mikel will try placing a midfielder at left back like he did with Partey. I'm not sure. Robert says play Zinchenko left back, but have Jorginho with Rice as a midfield too. That's what I suggested. Yeah. Kiwior is a backup on the left side as centre back in a 4-3. I'm struggling to see what Zinni is. Afsar says Timber may be back by March. I'm hopeful that Timber will be back a little bit earlier than that. But you know, when it's an injury like that, you just never know, do you? And when you've been out the game for such a long time, there's always a chance that you're going to suffer injuries around that as you're stepping up your recovery. So, for example, if you've not been doing too much movement, you're finally coming back into it, you can easily pull your groin, you can easily pull your hamstring, you can easily pick up other problems, you know, along the way. Cesar says Granit Xhaka at left back sounds a better option at the moment. Benjamin says wild idea for Anfield, Gabriel at left back with Rice as a John Stones type centre back stepping into midfield during possession. I don't want to see our midfield without Rice or Partey in it at the moment. I think it's really, really weak. Really weak. Just going back to the Tierney point, Wandering Minstrel says, don't blame Kieran for going or wanting to leave. Me neither. And that's why I'm not sitting there going, bring him back. Fuad says, Harry, what position would you prioritize in January? For me, it's the defense. For me, it's the midfield. But that is, of course, dependent on how long we think that Tomiyasu and Timber are going to be out for. Now, we don't have that information. And that's what makes it really, really difficult to kind of try and gauge what the right thing to do is here. But to me, it's midfield. It's definitely not centre forward. All the talk's been around centre forward of late. But to me, the big, glaring, obvious problem that we have at Arsenal right now is in that left back position. You know it. I know it. Everybody coming up against us knows it. And they're going to do their utmost to exploit that and expose that. So we've got to be really, really careful here. Godwin says, you are right, Harry. Zinchenko is our best technician and should be one of the eights. We have to get another reliable left slash centre-back hybrid profile. Well, we've got that in Jurrien Timber and we've got that in Tomiyasu as well. It's just unfortunate that both of those players are injured at the moment. So when we talk about squad depth, it can get to the point, right, where you're just asking for something that's impossible. You're demanding too much in terms of, you know, what these players or how many players it's feasible to stockpile. And I get that, you know, I get that. But just in this instance where we've lost two of the main bits of cover that we have there, but not just the cover, two players that are different to Zinchenko. So, you know, sometimes you lose players of a certain profile that can upset the balance of a side, and that can be a problem. Some of you are suggesting Kai Havertz plays at left back. I don't think you're going to see that anytime soon. And to be honest, that's not an experiment I want us to be to embarking on going into some of these big games. But listen, if you're not watching this live, if you're watching it on playback, please do get involved in the comments and let me know what you think on this. If you are watching us, make sure you leave a like on the video. It really, really does help. There's no reason, given how many of you are watching, why we shouldn't have at least 100 likes on the board. For someone who said, I can't remember who it was, that I'm sitting in the gents, I'm not. I'm at the 90min office. I'm in one of the recording booths at the moment. Sneaked off for a bit of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Get involved in the comments, leave a like, subscribe, all the rest of it. If you're listening on audio, please do leave us a review too, and we'll be back tomorrow with another episode of the podcast. Until then, take care of yourselves and have a think about it. Have Arsenal actually got a problem at left back? Because I think currently we do. In the long term, probably not, but currently we do have an issue there. And I'm not quite sure what the best way of navigating through this next period of games is, given the issues that we have. Thank you for listening. As always, I'll catch you soon. Goodbye.